Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the NASW-NY C.A.R.E.S Community Engagement Initiative for the fourth event of the School Social Work Series, School Social Workers and Supervision Towards C Licensure, a panel discussion. My name is Angelique Imani Rodriguez, and I'm the Manager of Membership Engagement and Special Programs with the NASW New York chapter. Registration for the very last event of the NASW-NY C.A.R.E.S School Social Work Series is still open. This one is a CE opportunity and does require a minimal fee to join, but we encourage you all, if you need the CE contact hours, to register today. I'll drop the link in the chat for you all shortly. If you're looking for more CE workshops, we also offer a robust CE schedule, and there's absolutely so much more on the horizon for the chapter. We do hope you opted to add your email address to our email list so you can start receiving communications from us, including our weekly email digest sent every Wednesday that provides the most current and updated information from NASW New York. Post-event, you'll receive all of the updates and upcoming information around the chapter, as well as any, as well as any resources or information provided by tonight's guests. Please remember that by registering for any NASW New York events, you agree to abide by the NASW New York anti-harassment policy, the link of which I will drop in the chat for you as well. Before we begin tonight's event, we want to take a moment to acknowledge that NASW New York recently experienced a Zoom bombing incident during our free virtual CARES programming. We are actively communicating with our national office to implement stronger preventative and responsive protocols, as these types of disruptions have unfortunately been on the rise across virtual platforms across the nation. We are taking every precaution, but we do want to prepare you that should an incident occur tonight, it may involve hateful or emotionally distressing content. Please note that we have a tool ready to immediately handle any incident should that occur. Our mission does remain to provide free and accessible NASW New York C.A.R.E.S community engagement programming to support New York social workers with content that matters to them. However, if these disruptions do continue to escalate, the chapter may need to reconsider the structure of these offerings. We do appreciate your understanding and your patience and your ongoing support. Once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. If you have any questions about this event or any other community engagement events at the NASW New York chapter, I'll drop my email for you in the chat shortly as well. Without further ado, I'll introduce you to our panelists for this evening. Wendy Castiglia, LMSW, President of the New York State School Social Workers Association, and Dr. Roger Ball, LCSW, MA, PhD, SIFI, Supervisor of School Social Workers for the Bronx. Unfortunately, our third panelist for the evening, Dr. Gabriela McBride, President of the New York State Social Work Education Association, had a personal family emergency to attend to this evening and was unable to make it. She extends her apologies to her fellow panelists and to all of our attendees this evening. We do also have the Executive Director of the NASW New York chapter, Dr. Shakara A. Kennedy, who will be joining us briefly tonight as well. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy, for being here. On behalf of the chapter and our members, let me extend our gratitude for your time, energy, and efforts tonight, panelists. Let's begin with some brief introductions, beginning with Wendy. Can you give us a brief intro to the work you've done and your experience with school social work?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to join you in this panel. It's quite exciting to be included. And I hope that I can impart some advice and help tonight. I have been a school social worker, I'm going to age myself, since '92. I am from the Western New York, Buffalo area. Born, raised, and continue to live up here in true upstate New York. And I have worked primarily in middle schools, but I also, the last 9-10 years, have worked in elementary schools, doing, the variety of work that a traditional school social worker does. Where I'm in suburban schools, so I tend to be the one person in the building, and I kind of do it all. And I've been very, very lucky to love my job all this time. I've been involved in NYSSWA. I started getting involved in the early '90s. I kind of took a little hiatus when my daughter came around, and then I rejoined the board in 2018, becoming president in the summer of 2020. And I've been president of NYSSWA ever since. And, so it's very exciting. It's a wonderful profession, and I'm really thrilled to be able to advocate for and help others that are interested in this profession. I'm very passionate about it.
Thank you so much. Dr. Ball.
right, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for having me again. My name is Roger Ball, and I have served as a school social worker for a number of years, probably about 7 or 8 years. Before that, I serve as a program director in a non-for-profit world, supporting specifically for Children's Aid Society, um, supporting young men of color in Harlem. Um, and before that, I was a program director with the Archdiocese of New York Drug Abuse Prevention Program. And there I directed a school-based program as well, where I supervised and supported social workers providing psychoeducational work within the Archdiocese school systems, parochial schools. More recently, I have served as and in public education. I've served as social worker, as I said, for about 7 or 8 years, subsequently as an assistant principal for about 5 years. And for the last 4 years or so, I've served as supervisor of social workers within public education. And that work entails all of the traditional work, including crisis response, supporting schools when there's loss of life to other children or faculty, our staff, and also do just a ton of training and development, including placing social work interns across public education.
Thank you so much for that. So let's begin with our first question of the evening. What are the key steps and challenges that school social workers commonly face on the path to clinical licensure in New York? And let's start there.
I'll happily start this one off. So there are quite a few challenges in a school setting to get your C. It's not impossible, and it's being done every day, every year. There's many school social workers that are qualifying for their C license, their clinical licensure. There's a couple pieces that have to be in place. There needs to be supervision by an LCSW. That's the main way. There are a few other professions that can provide supervision, but the LCSW is the preferred way, I guess you could say, or the easiest way. Not all districts have LCSWs as on their staff, so that's one of the difficulties with this. There is a clause in the state regulations that say that the supervisor must be hired and employed by the same agency that the social worker is working for. So we used to, but way back in the day, be able to hire supervision to get our clinical licensure. We're no longer able to do that. It has to come from the district that we work for. Now, some districts are able to do like a memorandum of understanding with other districts or other social workers, but they have to be somehow on the under the employment status of that school district. So that's the one thing that needs to happen. The other very important thing is that the social worker needs to actually be doing clinical work. This is where it gets a little tricky because some districts, when they're quite large or small, I guess it depends on the structure of the district, don't always use their social workers for true clinical work, like psychotherapy with children with counseling on IEPs or getting regular mental health services in the school district. Sometimes the social workers are assigned to doing more of the basic needs, such as shelter and clothing and food service, McKinney-Vento, those kinds of things, which don't qualify for clinical work. So that's the other little dicey area where you may be working as a school social worker, but your actual day-to-day tasks are not considered clinical. So what the state wants is they want 3 different activities that the social worker is doing in their practice to show that they're doing clinical work. One of those areas is diagnosis. And this is also a little tricky because school districts are school districts. They're places of education. They're not places of mental health service. So that gets a little uncomfortable for some school districts to think that their school social workers are doing diagnosis. But we are doing diagnosis. We have a child come to us in crisis, or a teacher sends us a child and says this child seems very sad or very anxious or whatever it may be. And we meet with the child, we spend time with them, talk to their families, talk to the teachers, and we make a determination that, yes, in fact, this child does seem like they are experiencing aspects of anxiety or aspects of depression or whatever it may be. And then from that diagnosis, if you will, we then develop the next thing, which is psychotherapy. And we make arrangements through parents and teachers to meet with this child on a regular basis. And we meet with them maybe once a week, maybe once every other week for a 30-minute session. And we provide psychotherapy. And we do, that's, in its most basic form, they're looking at a different kind of verbal method of therapy that we are doing with the child. The third aspect is having an assessment-based treatment plan. So again, if you are meeting with the child on a regular basis, you are doing so because you feel through your diagnosis process that this child could use help with coping strategies or social skills or self-esteem or ways to handle their depression or whatever it may be. And so basically this assessment-based treatment plans, the easiest way to think about it is that we are using research-based modalities in trying to help our students, whether it's play therapy, whether it's cognitive behavior therapy, dialectical behavior therapy. Those are just a few of the more common ones that, excuse me, school social workers use. So we have these three pieces in place. And while this is going on, you need to have, the state requires a letter of authorization from the district saying, we acknowledge that our social workers are providing this kind of service to some of our students. So there's all these little pieces that have to kind of come into place for a school social worker to qualify to work towards their clinical license. But it is doable, and there are a lot of, like I said, school social workers who are accomplishing this and becoming, LCSWs. The one other thing I'm going to mention is in the forms, there's a lot of forms, of course, that the state requires that we complete. One of them is called Form 6, and it's sort of a pre-authorization from the state saying that you are indeed qualify, what your job qualifies to work towards getting your clinical license. It's not mandatory, but we highly recommend it because you send this to the state before you start doing all your supervision and everything. And then if the state comes back and says, yes, this looks good, go ahead and start your process, then you're good to go. If they come back and say, no, you're missing a few pieces, then you can get that together before you start the whole road of 2,000 hours of supervised clinical work and all of that. So I think that's kind of it in a nutshell. I think that answers your question, but if there's other things that I left out, please, someone else feel free to pipe in.
Just a question came in as you were speaking, Wendy, in the chat from Edith Jones Schwimmer. Thank you for your question, Edith. Is there a template for the letter from the district acknowledging the existence of the conditions for the supervision available?
We are working on that on our website. I believe we have a couple up on our website already, and we are trying to gather more to have them be available so that people can see what that actually needs to look like.
Excellent. We also have another comment from Mindy Weinberg. Thank you for being here again, Mindy's been here all week with us at the series. Even an LCSW is not officially qualified to make a diagnosis, only to report that a client, or in this case, a student, is exhibiting symptoms of a diagnosis. So how do you get around that in a way that is in compliance with our professional code of ethics and also meets the expectations of the school social work position?
Well, one of the easiest ways to do that, quite honestly, is through the Committee on Special Education process and the Medicaid billing process. So in order to have a child qualify for counseling on their individual education plan, there has to be a counseling evaluation. Through that counseling evaluation, there is the recommendations of the social worker, which becomes a legal document. And then from there, there's also, excuse me, sorry, I'm dealing with the fall change of weather here, so I apologize for my cough. But through that, there as part of the Medicaid documentation as well, it requires a ICD-10 code, which is a diagnosis code. And so through both of those aspects, you are able to show that what you're doing is diagnosis. And it makes the district feel a little bit more, not as nervous, because they don't want us to become a mental health agency, which we're not. Schools are not mental health agencies. So through those two aspects, it's the easiest way to do that. You can do it through working with general education students. A little bit more difficult because you don't necessarily do a counseling evaluation, but that might be something you can work out with your district, that in fact you do that to have that documentation proving your assessment.
Thank you so much. So this question is posed to both of you. Now that we've gone over some of the key steps and challenges school social workers commonly face, how do you think that institutions can better support them through this process?
Who would you like to take that answer?
Yeah, sure. Support them through the process that Wendy just mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah, so I want to maybe just back up just a little bit by sort of noting that, and thank you, Wendy, for what is a very comprehensive response there that is inclusive of sort of, the state requirements. Most school systems, public schools in particular, New York City certainly, upfront doesn't even require an LMSW to be hired as a social worker, right? So MSW is required, but within, I believe, 3 years or so, you need to get your L, and there are no requirement to get your C. And if and when you do get it, existentially, and in terms of your employment, it makes no never mind. So you get your LMSW or your LCSW in terms of your employment within public education. That is not a thing that they ask for. It's not something that they look for. And then also there's not enough LCSW currently that at the district level or at a central level or even in a building level to provide the level of supervision for school social workers, in part because they themselves are, in fact, there's oftentimes no distinguishing features in terms of their job descriptions between the LMSW and the LCSW. Most people who get their LCSW within public education, for example, is something that they either do on their own or they have some form of quote unquote informal structures that is not sanctioned by or advanced by the district or the governing body. And so it's not that it's not that folks aren't doing the work, as Wendy so aptly said. The work is taking place, and most school social workers, including, by the way, those who are serving kids in general education, can make the case easily that they are doing a lot of those modalities. They are doing the clinical work, and clinic, and that doesn't only include CBT or DBT or motivational interviewing or one of those other modalities. The support on the ground. I oftentimes have robust conversation with our social workers and with social work interns about what constitute clinical work in those spaces. So what institutions can do is invest, right? One of the things that they can do is invest in supervision, in supervisors, hire LCSW based on the needs to elevate, because in the end, our students will get and families will receive the better services because we're doing things like slowing down. All of us who are on here that knows and understands schools, that you go at 100 miles an hour relentlessly, and the caseloads are high, and all of those things. And we're driven a lot of times by crisis. This is not the kind of place where you sort of put a do not disturb sign on your door, though you do. But at any given time, you could have a schedule as to all the youngsters that you plan to see, and you may not get to any of them because your work is driven by crisis. So schools up front, I think, could spend more time investing in hiring clinical supervisors and prioritizing clinical supervision. Most school social workers are not supervised by a social worker. They're supervised by an administrator, principal, an assistant principal, so on and so forth.
Thank you so much for those responses. So now we're talking about these sorts of challenges. So what are some of these unique systemic challenges that school social workers face compared to clinical or agency-based social workers? And how can school social workers effectively advocate within these educational environments?
I'll start off, and then Dr. Ball, you can certainly add to it. I do want to say that if a district is billing for Medicaid, they do have to have an LCSW to sign off on that. And then LCSW can supervise an LMSW to get the Medicaid billing. But so that's one of the areas where districts are starting to hire, at least in my area, hire more LCSWs because they're finally realizing that Medicaid is a lot of money. And it's worth it for them to do it. Although I've been, some districts have been billing for Medicaid since the 90s. So, but anyway, so that is necessary for that piece. As far as the difficulties, Dr. Ball hit on it a little bit already by saying that so many school social workers are not supervised by LCSWs, let alone social workers. Many of us are supervised by our principals, who may be wonderful people and great at their jobs, but they don't really understand mental health. Sometimes you're lucky and you get someone who kind of intuitively has a sense for at least the importance of it, and that, some of the aspects of it. But that is probably one of the bigger challenges, is that we don't have that supervision piece. And a lot of us have to create that situation where, like, for example, myself, we have 4 elementary schools, and our 4 elementary staff get together once a month to do just that, to try to talk about students or families or situations and get some help from each other. The other thing that I think is a big challenge is that many times social workers are the only ones in the building that is a mental health person. There's the nurse, hopefully. Sometimes it's a psychologist who comes around, maybe part-time, maybe you're lucky and they're full-time and you have someone else who has a little bit of knowledge, some knowledge of mental health and counseling needs. But for the most part, we're often alone, and it's very difficult. And as Dr. Ball said, we do often operate under crises. I often say that my students learn flexibility and patience from me because they know they may have a session planned with me, and then a crisis happens and they go back to class and I have to handle the crisis. And they know, though, that if it's their turn and they're having a really bad day, that other student will be sent back and I will give my attention to them. But that is a part of school social work. Whereas when you're in an agency, you have a do not disturb sign, you have a secretary answering your phone, you have someone, doing those kinds of things, making your appointments or whatever it may be, and you can just concentrate on the therapy part. So those are the challenges. On the other side, that's also what makes it so exciting. That's one of the things I love about it, is that every day is so different. You go in thinking you have a plan, and you find out 3rd grade's on a field trip, and then you change your plan. Or something just happened in a child's life and they need you all day, and that changes your plan. And so I kind of love that part of it as well, that unpredictability of it. But I think those are probably 2 of the bigger challenges for this particular profession.
Yeah, and I'll just thank you for that, Wendy, as well. The only thing I'll add is that, which is what Wendy said, is that the business of being the only person or one of 2 or 3 people in an entire building with several dozens in the faculty, with your degree, it can be a lonely place, and oftentimes you might not be thought about or planned for. And so much of the professional development and all of the things that are going on that runs, and rightfully so in terms of the academic side, but oftentimes folks are not thinking about you. So during PDs, you might be in your office, or you might be, trying to do other things, or but you're not necessarily factored in. And one of the things that I really love about some of the emerging work in public education is that on some district, some district level, so I'm thinking our central level, district level, and then at school level, districts are hiring social workers, and they're hiring supervisors of social workers. They're also pairing their crisis response team at a district level with a social worker, and that model is proving effective because the social worker is like in some cities where they pair police officers with a clinician who understand mental health. And so some of these folks are really able to come alongside school district and provide support, including training and support of all the social workers in those districts, and also at the central level. For example, today I did a training. I'm doing a 3-part training, first of which was today, on narrative therapy, and really sitting down with a room full of social workers to help them think about how do you get young people to tell their stories, right? How do you get them to disrupt some of the old and weary stories about who they are and why they are the way they are, and really help them to cultivate and to create the stories. Under normal circumstances, a school social worker may never get that kind of exposure to really think clinically about how you get young people to retell or re-narrate their stories or recast their stories. And so those are some emerging things that in the future, I think, could also very much fit into the conversation around clinical supervision.
Thank you so much for those responses. I got a question in the chat that was sent to me. As Roger Ball said, a lot of social workers are supervised by admins who aren't social workers. How can we explain to our supervisors who aren't social workers the importance of having this, and how to make a case for administration and the Board of Ed to provide this to us?
Well, I just want to say up front, I do not, in this forum and this space, I am not speaking for New York City Public School, but as a person who works in the systems and also understand the challenges. And so, for example, for the largest public school system in the entire country, you have to, there's all kinds of infrastructures, union issues that you have to factor in. Some, you can't have some who are receiving and others who are not receiving. So it would require, even if they're great ideas and emerging ideas in pockets, this is something where the entire system would have to move in unison to say that there needs to be policy changes. There needs to be hiring reconsideration in terms of hiring practices, as well as what roles and responsibilities may look like. And so it's not just an administrator. And by the way, I know principals who, when they're starting their school, the first person, the most important, the first hire is a social worker, because they understand that if they have a highly competent social worker in their building when they're starting their school, there's a very good chance that the mental health of our young people and families are going to be taken care of. So I want to also just say that there are plenty of administrators out there who are all too keen about the centrality and the importance of having a highly competent social worker in their building, or clinicians to provide support. So I think that in my mind, we have to sort of think macro rather than, let's say, a building leader. I think if the conversation about a building leader, help them to understand how to utilize, for example, in a better way, their school social worker. On a macro level is about really having the will to say, if clinical support is important to us, then we're going to hire for that. We're going to put our money where our mouths are.
I think also, to piggyback on that, I'm very fortunate that I work in a district that does put mental health, I would say, in the forefront, if not first. Obviously, educating students is the very first, but we have a board and administrators that recognize that if a child is not in a good frame of mind, it doesn't matter how good your teacher is and how good your programs are, they are not going to learn. They're not going to remember what they're learning. They are not going to be successful. And I think, that's one of the things that COVID did for us. You know, those of us who've been around as social workers and school social workers have known for decades that children have issues. When their parents get divorced, it's not easy for them. When somebody dies or something happens, they have issues, or they naturally have mental health concerns. COVID told the rest of the world what we've been saying for years, and they finally listened. So I think in a lot of ways, people are starting to have greater awareness that there is a need to support our children from a mental health perspective. And that in order to do that, you know, one of your best bets is a school social worker. Now, ideally, in a school district, there are several other professions that work together. We have school counselors that are very important. We have school psychologists that are very important. School nurses, it's still baffling to me that they're not a mandated profession, school nurses. And the four of us all need to be present and working together because we all provide a very unique role in helping this child be successful. And, you know, when you talk about, you know, mental health and clinical work, you're looking at a school social worker. And we really are trained to look at the whole picture. As Dr. Ball was alluding to, there are, you know, a lot of times social workers are initially thought of for what we can do for the basic needs, helping to provide basic needs for families and children. But it is the whole picture that we have been trained to do. And so it is important. And I think, you know, and how do we get that across to people? That's the challenge that NYSSWA faces all the time, trying to educate that. And I think it's just as every opportunity you have to educate and to tell your principal, hey, that's what I do, or that's what I can do, or, you know, give them brochures, give them pamphlets, anything you can do to show that what you do is important and makes a difference. And like I said, I think it's becoming easier and easier to sell that because people are realizing that we're needed. We're needed more and more. I mean, the issues are getting bigger and bigger. They're not getting smaller. They're getting bigger. So anyway, it's a nonstop battle trying to just keep getting your name out there. Make sure they know you're there.
Can I just add one more thing on that, which I just think is, and I say this to social workers again and again, which is why it's so important for you to make sure there's a seat at the table for you, not only in the clinical space, in your academic space, in public education or whatever area you're in. Get on the principal's cabinet, get on the ILT, like get on all of go in the spaces and sit there in spaces that you're not necessarily comfortable with the language when they're talking about, and I was an assistant principal, as I said, and I remember feeling so lost when I became an assistant principal because it was like a whole different jargon, whole different sets of skill sets. But it's important for social workers to also have a seat at the table where academic conversations are happening so that you're able to contribute not only in the mental health conversation, but also in academics, and also get up to know what they know what the teachers know, and help them to know what you know as well.
Yes, keep inviting yourself to meetings. Don't wait to be invited. Keep inviting yourself. Go to board meetings. Go to, like Dr. Ball said, go to principal meetings. Be department leaders. Get yourself out there and make sure that you become an integral part of the makeup of the school. Don't wait to be invited. You've got to get out there and invite yourself. Because you will be forgotten. You are the one of the only. It's not 5 first grade teachers that will be remembered. It will be, you have to make yourself remembered.
Thank you so much for your comments and responses. We do have some extra questions in the chat as well. From Edith Jones-Schwimmer, thank you so much for your engagement once again. Are there examples of districts in New York State that have made this shift from LMSWs in isolation under non-clinical administrators to the LCSW supervision model?
I'm not sure that I really understand the question. Are you asking, are there districts that have LCSWs providing supervision?
Edith, feel free to unmute.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi,
yeah, we know each other. So what I'm asking is, we know that many, as Dr. Ball said, many social workers are working under administrators, right, who are non-clinical. They are part of the school administration. So when a school makes the shift from your LMSWs unsupervised, right, to now we're going to have a more cohesive model with supervision, whether it's for Medicaid billing or not, right? Are there examples of districts that have made that shift to the full understanding of what the advantages are to that, and how was that shift received by administration? Because I'm struggling with it right now. I am supervising as an LCSW 13 social workers. And that's the only thing I'm doing. I'm not seeing students anymore, so that we can implement the Medicaid model. And where I'm really struggling with an administrative, just do it, just do it. We just need the money. And I'm like, well, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and I need to do the following things. You know, is there a district that has made that shift, and what does it look like, and who are they? I would love to talk to them.
There's a couple of districts that come to mind. What district are you with again, Edith?
In Kingston.
Which is where?
In Kingston, just south of
Upstate.
Albany,
Okay.
north of Poughkeepsie, well, across the river from Poughkeepsie.
Okay. I believe that Greece has a model like that outside of Rochester.
Okay.
New York City has a model like that, doesn't it, Dr. Ball? I believe there's LCSWs that they are hired primarily for supervision.
Not really, no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I
no.
misunderstood that.
Yeah, we have LCSW and supervisors of social workers, but they that model, that's very different from what Edith is talking about, which is supervising the social workers on a larger scale to provide support for kids, and like in the model for billing and all of that. That's not a model. The closest we'll have to that would be someone like me, who's a supervisor of social workers. I have my team members, or supervisor of social, the psychologists of social workers, and providing special education services to young people, and those are usually psychologists, not social workers.
Okay, I misunderstood. I know someone I thought that's what she did, but
You said Greece?
Greece, New York. It's outside of Rochester. GREECE. His name is Jim Garner specifically. I believe that's what he does. He would be a good place to start.
Okay, we do have some extra questions in the chat. One from Brittany Smith. For schools focused on emotional behavioral health, not public, would it count to be supervised by an LCSW who is at the same company but different program?
Maybe I could. So I want to see if I find the question. So for young people.
Brittany, if you'd like to unmute to clarify a bit for us.
Hi, yes. I'm actually in the process of interviewing with one, but so Devereaux usually focuses on residential, but they are starting a new day school program, and they're hiring a social worker. And I wanted to find out if I work under the umbrella of Devereaux, even though they'd be a separate program, if I could have supervision that way before I ask them, like if it's even a thing that's possible.
Yeah, I don't know if I know the answer to that.
I'm gonna just take a little guess here that if there is the same organization, same
agency,
company, agency, then it would be okay.
Mhm.
But that's where that Form 6 comes in as being super important. It might even be something, depending on how much time you have to make a decision on your job, to reach out to the state to find out, would this qualify? And they might, and even Devereaux, is that the name of the organization? They might even know the answer to that.
Okay.
But I think it just has to be the same employer.
Okay, thank you. I have my next interview tomorrow, and I was like, maybe I can get an answer.
All the best with
Good
your
luck.
interview.
Thank you.
Good luck, good luck. We have another question. So how do you get over this barrier of time for supervision in the role of school social worker? Is it possible for us to meet enough to meet the requirements of an LCSW?
Yeah, that's a good, if the conversation is about, it sounds as though the conversation is about supervisory hours, right? And it generally takes between 3 to 3.5 years of clinical supervision to get to meet the requirement. And as a full-time social worker, 3 years, the academic 10 months, and I believe Wendy, you could help me if I'm off with my numbers, and generally about 3.5 years. 3 years if you're working. Let's say it includes summer work, and then about 3 years if you're doing the regular academic year with weekly supervision.
There is enough time to do it. It does get a little tricky, and you might have to get permission from your school district to meet with your supervisor for that hour a week. But again, when we put it to our district about why it's important, and again, because our district bills for Medicaid, they want more LCSWs because they get more Medicaid. So when you put it in terms of money, sometimes that helps as far as making the argument that you need this time. But I think also if a district is going to put the resources towards a school social worker, they aren't just doing that willy-nilly. They're doing it because they feel there's an importance there, and that hopefully you can sell that as, this is why we need the supervision, so that we can make sure we're doing our job correctly and getting the most for what you want out of us.
Okay, we have some questions in from Michael. If a school is billing Medicaid, does the IEP have to say psychological counseling to bill or counseling? I see these are two different related services officially.
I believe it has to be psychological counseling.
Okay.
And that's a problem, actually, Michael. I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of times when people write an IEP, they don't write it correctly. And so when they indicate services on the IEP, they just call it counseling services. And it has to be psychological counseling services.
Okay, we have an additional question from Michael. Thank you, Michael, for your engagement. Can schools bill Medicaid for master's level school psychologists and school counselors?
No, they cannot. They have to be a PhD level for a psychologist to get billing, and school counselors they don't have a license they don't have a state license that let me restart over again. The state does not recognize their license as far as Medicaid reimbursement.
Thank you so much for these responses to these questions coming in. I have a question for you both. For social workers new to the school system or just beginning their licensure journey, what advice or resources would you recommend to help them stay motivated and on track?
For social workers who are just starting, they have to, I would say, offer yourself a lot of grace, because there's going to be a lot in schools that you have no idea what's swirling around you. I would also say to find a mentor. One of the things that we are doing is that we are looking at social workers who have been hired 1 to 3 years and are really beginning the conversations about what kind of supports and infrastructures we want to provide for them, including training and development that's uniquely designed for the new social workers, whether it's around understanding IEPs, whether it's around understanding tier supports of interventions, MTSS, from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support, how to work collaboratively with families, how to engage young people, how to collaborate with teachers and administrators, how to find resources in the community and form partnerships, all of those things that we know all too well. But for a new social, and we support a lot of social work interns and hire a lot of those social work interns in public education. And so here's one of the things that we have done intentionally is that we have bring on social work interns to do 1-2 years of internships with us. So by the time they are hired, they would have already spent 2 years learning the ropes. And so to have the infrastructures for me at sort of the seat that I sit in, to really do a lot of training and development for social workers, including trauma-informed work, including, again, our RTI, or MTSS, so on and so forth, where they're getting the foundational stuff and understanding, like, and some of the other basic stuff on what they, for New York City, what they call chancellor's regulations, whether it's understanding and responding to suicidality, all of the things that we experience. Maxine, New York City Public School.
I would like to just piggyback on that. I echo what Dr. Ball said about the mentor. It's very, very important to find a mentor, whether it's somebody in your district or someone else that maybe you graduated with that's in the schools, someone that knows something about schools. Working in a school is extremely different than any other form of social work. Most of what you learn in school, unless you're lucky to have a school social work track in your master's program, you throw out the window and do something completely different, because it's not an agency setting. It's so different that it's hard to kind of describe. I have a friend who spent a lot of time in clinical agencies, and she often talks to me about, okay, well, how does this work in a school again? What is the politics of a school? Confidentiality, for example, looks incredibly different in a school district than it does in an agency. In an agency, maybe you're just talking to your supervisor about that client. In a school, you have teachers and OTs, PTs, principals, nurses, all kinds of people that you have to try to figure out, where does confidentiality fit with this, and where's the line? That's just one example that we're dealing with probably every day, finding out important information about kids and trying to figure out, how much information do I need to give to the teacher? How much do I need to give to the principal? It's very, very different, and you do need to have some kind of a mentor. I also am going to do a shameless plug and say, join NYSSWA, the New York State School Social Workers Association. We have a robust website that has a lot of information about being a school social worker. We can help you with that mentor. If you don't know of someone in your area that is a mentor, we can help connect you with someone in your region to help you to get started. But it is, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, but it is very different. And so I think that piece about the mentor is really important. And we also are still required to have our 36 hours of clinical training, of our CE credits, and make sure that you are getting things that really are pertinent to your degree. Your districts should be supporting you in this. They may not financially support you in this. Every district is different, but they need to be giving you time off. Or if your district is big enough to actually provide the training themselves, maybe through a BOCES or something, that would be ideal as well. But you really make sure that you're getting that training, particularly in some of those modalities that Dr. Ball was talking about. And how does that look in a school? How do you do DBT in a school? It's going to look very different than if you're in an agency. I think the mentor is number one. I noticed that there was someone that had mentioned a question about how do you transfer into school social work. I think just apply for the jobs. Apply.
Yeah, to that, and this is, I know that's coloring outside of the lines of the C conversation, but and I'm sure Dr. Kennedy will have, or they've had other sessions on those already, about getting and I actually think before we even talk about your C in public education, we need to talk about getting your provisional certification, which is a requirement. I know within New York State, I don't know if where you are, Wendy, if that's true as well, but within New York State, in a lot of schools, including the outer boroughs and the suburbs and outside of New York City, but certainly inside of New York City. No one can ever hire you in New York City as a school social worker until you have gotten your provisional certification to be hired as a school social worker. And maybe someone could drop that in the chat in order to get your school.
Well, the
If you have to get.
provisional, yes, but to be permanently certified, you need 2 years experience in a school. So the provisional is, I mean, in my experience, the provisional is something that you can get once you're hired. But maybe it's different in New York City, at
No,
different
it's
parts of
different.
the state. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's different. In New York City, you have to apply and get your provisional certification, and then you can be hired.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then to be permanently certified, you need 2 years experience in a school.
yeah. Oh,
Okay. George, please feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for the space. I appreciate the opportunity to be together and with all the engagement and positivity towards school social work. It's amazing. I was a school social worker in the DOE as well, and now I'm doing full-time crisis intervention and suicide prevention. I'm in a lot of the training integration and providing the clinical training. I have my LCSW, and I'm really eager to help support in the provision of some of that clinical training and supervision on the school side as well. That's where my heart is certainly. And there was during those years where I was also working on my LCSW too. So there's tremendous overlap in that crisis world, and so much that is done on the school side, and where that's such a referral source for mobile crisis teams and for 988. And there's so much interaction and the potential for work together. So if there's any way, because I had seen when I was going through the process too, that if your direct employer or your building doesn't have an LCSW to provide the supervision, you can, do a contract with a third party, even if it's not for compensation, just as long as everyone is under that agreement where you're able to engage with a third party supervisor too. So if there's any way that any opportunity for support in that, or provision of any trainings, or just consultation or working together in a collaborative way, I would really be happy to do that.
You have to make sure your school district makes that arrangement. It
Okay.
can't be done by the individual. It has to be done through the school district.
Okay. Thank you.
But they could reach out to you and then try to petition the school district.
I just want to jump back to something that was said, and Wendy, you touched on it. For example, we offer a lot of CEUs, and so many social workers are just maybe not utilizing at no cost to them, even within the district. And one of the questions that we've been asking is, why is it that you don't participate in some of these? And so the conversation is about new social workers. Sometimes you're so bogged down with the daily grind of the space that you work in that it's hard to to get your head up long enough to get to nurture yourself, to get professional development, to make sure that you are up with the latest research and all of that. And so I would say one of the things I would say to new social workers and those who are not so new is, don't forget yourself. Don't forget to make sure that you are beyond the sea, including if there are opportunities for that, but just ongoing, reading journals, attending conferences. The National School Social Workers Conference is coming up in the spring in St. Louis. There are all kinds of opportunities. Your university that you graduated from might be offering professional development. So just look for opportunities to stay on the cutting edge, because sometimes we go into those buildings and we don't come back out.
That is very, very true. And it's so rejuvenating to get out of your building, to go and learn something new, to refresh your mind on things maybe you learned in graduate school or that are new to you. And it just really rejuvenates you to go back into the trenches, so to speak. And I think also, talking to new social workers and maybe reminding those of us that have been around a while, it's really important that you do take care of yourself. No one else is going to. They come to you when they have a need and when they have a crisis. There was a principal a few years ago. We had 2 tragedies very close to each other. And so all the counselors, social workers came together to try to help the teachers and the students. And this one principal actually reached out to our department and said, "What can we do to help you?" And I thought, gosh, in 30 years of working, I have never had an administrator say to me, How can we support you? You're doing all this hard work of listening to all of this. What can we do for you? And it's really important. We need to do that for each other and do that for yourself. Force yourself to get out of your room to have lunch. Sometimes my lunch is 7 minutes long, but I'm out of my building. I'm sitting at a different table, looking at adults. I may be thinking about the 10 million things I have to do when I get back to my room, but it's so, so important. Take care of yourself personally. And like Dr. Ball said, take care of yourself professionally. You have to do that. Otherwise, it's like, it's like they say when you're on an airplane, give yourself the oxygen first before you help others. It's really, really true. And no one's going to stand up for us. We have to stand up for ourselves.
So we're winding down to the last minutes in our event. One, thank you both for being here. I'm going to give you both the mic for any last remarks before we end the evening. I want to thank our attendees, thank our panelists. Thank you, Dr. Kennedy, for also being here with us. Thank you for all of those that engaged in the chat and had questions to ask. Any last words, Wendy and Roger?
Well, I'll start by saying that you matter. The work that you do matter, the lives that you're changing matter, and you're seen, you're heard, even when some folks don't acknowledge that. Please know that you're making a difference. You are the change that we've been waiting for. You are the ones that continues to give children hope, to restore dignity, to show young folks that they belong and that their futures are bright. So I just want to say thank you. With C, without C, in hopes of C, you matter a great deal. And I hope and pray that the day will come where the conversation about you obtaining your C in the space that you work, that it won't be a stretch, but that it will be a reality. And I want to thank, NASW for dreaming here tonight, because it just might be one and it will come true.
Just to add very quickly to what he just said, there's many times I stand in my room looking around thinking, what the heck am I doing here? I'm not making any changes. I can't change these kids' lives. I can't get rid of their disabilities. I can't, make their families have a healthy home. I mean, but then I stop and I think, and there's research, decades of research that shows one of the biggest attributes of resiliency, or the biggest what's the word I'm looking for? Causes of resiliency in children is having a positive relationship with an adult for 6 months or more. That's all it is. And that is all of you. All you have to do is smile when they come in the door into your room and have some kind of a space that makes them feel safe and supported and cared for. And that you, no matter what they just did, no matter who they just insulted, no matter what just happened, you care about them, and that you are always happy to see them, even when sometimes you don't feel that way. Put a smile on your face, because that makes the difference. And I hope that you all have an opportunity in your career to have students say to you, you made a difference in my life. And they may do it in funny ways. They may bring a crumbled cookie and pull it out of their pocket and give it to you or whatever, but that's their way of saying you've made a difference in my life. And don't forget that when you get discouraged and you think, I can't make any changes in this kid's life, you are making a change in this child's life. And, just keep going, keep going.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much to our panelists and to our attendees. I appreciate you all being here and supporting the School Social Work series at the NYSSW New York chapter. It has been a pleasure and an honor to support this venture for us. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening. Wendy, Roger, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time, effort, and energy. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, NYSSW.
Take care.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.